What's up, everybody? Welcome to Hammer Down Motorsports. My name is Steve Fast. I hope you guys are having an amazing day. It's a beautiful day out here in Pennsylvania, and what better day to take out the 1972 Dodge Dart that we've got hiding up in the other shop. So it's getting towards the end of summer. We've been driving the Camaro a bunch. We drove the Porsche a little bit, but a lot of this summer has kind of been working on the shop, working on the truck build, and just kind of doing stuff like that. So I think it's time we have a little bit of fun and go out for a drive. Oh yes, listen to the old girl chop. There's nothing better than the sound of an old Mopar muscle. I'm gonna open some windows here, get this thing nicely cooled off. This car is no air conditioning, so basically this is the only air conditioning you got. But luckily enough, the rear windows go down all the way, so we got a full hard top kind of thing going on here. This thing has long tube headers, it's got heads, cam, it's a 360. Listen to that thing, it just sounds so awesome. There's nothing that sounds better than an old Mopar to me, especially one with a big cam. Roll down this back window here. So a little backstory on this car. This is a 1972 Dodge Dart Swinger. It's B5 blue with the B5 blue interior with the buckets. It's got a Hurst ratchet shifter with the automatics, a 727 torque flight. It's got an 8 3/4 rear with the posi. Let's pop the hood here once. There she is. Got the big radiator, 4-quart aluminum with the electric fan. You can see the engine moves around a little bit. That's from the cam and the fact that the motor mounts definitely need to be replaced. I do have new ones for that, so we are going to be doing that very, very soon. But under the hood here is very nice and clean. We do have the Hedman headers on here as well. And as far as Mopar muscle goes, this is one of my favorites. There's nothing better than a car that shakes the entire hood. Look at this. That is absolutely awesome. Westy tuned this thing up, so it's running really, really good. It's just those motor mounts are pretty worn out just from obviously having that big cam and having all that power, and they just kind of wear out after a while, but not a big deal. Pretty easy fix, but we're gonna take this thing out and have a little bit of fun with it. So here we are in the 1972 Dart, and this thing is a blast. It is totally different from any of the newer cars that I have. Obviously, from 1972, things were built very differently. It is not any bit of a performer on the track or anything like that. This thing's got a little bit of play in the wheel, so you kind of just, you can turn it a little bit from side to side, and basically you're not going to go anywhere. Everything in this car is all tight, brand new. It's got coilover shocks, so everything's been upgraded to pretty much what you would have had back then, just for kind of the best that it got back then, I could say that much. It's got the Krager SS wheels, we got the old school radial TA tires. I mean, it's kind of like driving a mattress down the road, honestly. Once you got everything tightened up, it turns really well, but it does have that little bit of looseness to it. So once you go around a corner, you kind of get it to where you kind of feel where everything has gotten to where it needs to be, and then you can punch it. I mean, it's actually kind of a fun little dance that this thing does. Definitely a whole lot different than a Camaro. Especially the modern Camaro like my 2017, which is pretty rigid when you go down the road. You got a lot of feedback from that car. You can take corners, you feel like you're on rails. This one's a totally different story, but it's a very fun story, I'll tell you that much. Oh, love it. And even braking wise, I mean, it's not bad. There's some pretty tight corners up here. You can hook them pretty good. You just got to kind of use the transmission. Just know what you're doing with this car. Don't expect it to be kind of like a modern car, but I mean, I can't imagine what the bigger muscle cars must handle like. I've never driven like the full-size Challenger or Charger from back in the 70s. I'm sure that they have a little bit more weight on this car. Back in the day, the A-Body, the Dart, the Duster, the Demon, they were kind of like, they were the light cars. They were the small ones. I mean, you could actually touch the passenger door from sitting in the driver's seat. So, I mean, it's not the big boat that you'd think it would be. And all in all, once you get the hang of how this car reacts, it is pretty nimble. With that sound, I just love it. There's nothing like a carbureted V8 big cam with headers going down the road. It's just so much fun. Backstory on my history with the Dart, and this Dart in particular. Back in 1972, my dad bought one of these cars brand new. It was a 344 speed swinger. It had a bench seat with tan interior. It was a green car, and he would always tell me about this car when I was a kid, and I was always kind of dreaming about it, and I'd always go look for them at car shows, and every time we'd go through, we'd find one, we'd check it out, and I always kind of wish that we would have still had his, but that car was long gone. He sold it probably in 1974. So yeah, basically I've always been on the hunt for one of these cars, just to kind of relive that little part of my childhood in my mind, what it was like to drive this car and kind of the fun times that my dad had in his. So one day I was just driving around through the back roads of Pennsylvania, just kind of chilling out on a nice day, and I was actually pretty close to where my wife used to work. Came around the corner and I saw this B5 Blue 72 Dart sitting on a guy's lawn, and it had a for sale sign on it. I was like, wow, you don't see those too often. I really actually wasn't even looking. I was looking for a C5 Corvette at that time. I was kind of the car I was after. I have a little bit of a sentimental value with the C5 Corvette as well. I used to work in the Chev dealership when those were brand new and I got to drive them. It was just kind of that's kind of really how it is for me. All of my cars, I pretty much have a memory with, all the older ones, and that's kind of why I chose them. But back to the Dart, I saw this car and it just kept speaking to me. I was like, nah, I want a Corvette. But then it's just like, oh, this is the 72 Dart. This is the one that I've been wanting since I was a kid. So basically I went home, I was just kind of thinking about it, and I ended up going back to work. This car just kept calling to me and calling to me. So I talked to the wife. I said, I think we should really look into getting this Dart, or at least have a look at it. And she agreed that, you know, this is a cool car, that we should probably get it. And for the money it was, I mean, it wasn't too crazy expensive. It was under 15 grand the guy was asking. So I figured there was a little bit of wiggle room there and we could probably make a deal as long as everything was in good shape. So what I ended up doing is she wrote a note and we put it in their front door. Now it took a while, like we didn't ever actually hear back from them for probably a couple of weeks. And then eventually I got a phone call, and the guy that owned the car called me. He's like, I don't actually use my front door, so it took me a long time to actually get your message. But he started telling me about the car, and his buddy had a 360 for it, so he pulled the 318 out and put that in another car that he eventually sold. It was actually a convertible Dart that he put the 318 in, and then he put the 360 in this, because this is the car that he was building for himself. He wanted to have a car to just kind of take the shows and have fun with, and just basically do exactly what I'm doing with it right now, just cruising through the back roads and having a great time with it and being able to show it off. And so yeah, he built this car for himself, him and his buddies, in his garage, and did everything really nicely and cleanly. And he also had a little bit of a motorcycle addiction as well, and that was kind of superseding the Dart. At the time, he didn't drive it as much anymore. He had the car for 10 years, and he's kind of like, well, I want to get more motorcycle stuff. I'm thinking about getting a boat. And his wife's like, well, you have to get rid of something if you're going to get something new. So he kind of decided that the Dart, he'd had his fun with it, it was time to let that one go, and he just kind of parked it on his lawn every odd Saturday or whatever, just to kind of advertise it, just so she knows that he's actively pursuing selling the car, but wasn't exactly first on his list to do. And I think when we actually met and I looked at the car and I was like ready right then and there to buy it, he was a little bit kind of taken back because I don't know if he was super ready to sell the car just yet, but I know how that feels when you're emotionally attached to a vehicle. It's really kind of tough to let go, but I did give him a fair price for the car. He came down a little bit, but I didn't beat him up on it. I knew how much this car meant to him, and he knew after me telling the story about how I've always wanted one of these cars, and I actually had my dad with me when we went to go look at it. He was down visiting, and it was just kind of a fun time because it was my birthday, and it was my dad just thought we were looking at some guy's car that I knew, and it ended up being that we ended up taking the car home. So that's my story with the Dart. 7 years later, pretty well. In October, I'll be 37 years old. I can't even believe it. But I've had this car for 7 years. I really haven't changed a whole lot about it, other than taking it to Westy's, getting it tuned up, putting that engine ground on that was missed. And all it really needs at this point, my water gauge, it shows way too high, because when you first started up, it's showing like 180, 190. So I have a new gauge for it. Need to put that in. We got to put the motor mounts in. And I put a different Hurst T-shifter on just because I like the chrome one better. The other one was a little bit more worn. And I put a different steering wheel on it because the one he had was kind of just the Grand GT steering wheel with the different kind of center. It didn't look like an old school muscle one. It kind of looked like an 80s one. So I changed it out to this one. I think it looks a little bit better. This is kind of the one that you're going to see in most muscle cars when people do retrofit the steering wheel. And that's pretty well it. Other than maintenance, this car's been really, really good. 7 years of fun so far, and hopefully many more to come. So there you have it, everybody, the 1972 Dodge Dart. We took it out for a drive, had a great time doing it. I hope you guys enjoyed coming along for the ride. If you guys want to see more content on this car, definitely drop your comments in the comments section. If you guys enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it a big thumbs up. If you're new to the channel, hit that subscribe button. And as always, keep that hammer down.